The sound of Nam Myoho Renge Kyo fills the morning air as practitioners around the world begin their day with this ancient chant. In that moment, something profound happens, a connection to a happiness that transcends all worldly conditions. This is not the fleeting joy we feel when we get a promotion or buy something we've wanted. This is something deeper, more enduring, and completely independent of what happens to us in our daily lives. When we examine happiness closely, we discover it comes in two distinct forms. The first kind surrounds us everywhere we look. It's the smile on a child's face when they receive a gift, the satisfaction of completing a challenging project, the warmth we feel when someone we love expresses their affection. This happiness depends entirely on things outside ourselves: our health, our relationships, our bank account, our reputation in the community. Because it relies on external conditions, this relative happiness can disappear as quickly as it arrives. Consider how quickly our mood can shift when we lose a job we thought was secure, when a relationship ends unexpectedly, or when our health takes a turn for the worse. The happiness we felt yesterday seems like a distant memory. We realize that everything we thought brought us joy was actually built on shifting sand. The Lotus Sutra teaches us about this impermanence when it states that all phenomena arise through dependent origination, meaning everything depends on causes and conditions that are themselves constantly changing. The Buddha himself experienced this truth during his years as Prince Siddhartha. Despite having wealth, power, and every material comfort imaginable, he felt a deep emptiness. He recognized that even the most privileged life could not shield him from the fundamental sufferings of aging, sickness, and death. His palace walls could not contain a lasting happiness, because that happiness depended on circumstances beyond anyone's ultimate control. This realization led him to seek something more reliable, more enduring. Nichiren Daishonin understood this same truth when he declared, "There is no greater happiness for human beings than chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo." He wasn't dismissing the importance of relative happiness. Good health, loving relationships, and material security all have their place in a fulfilling life. Instead, he was pointing toward a happiness that could exist alongside these things, or in their absence, a happiness that nothing in this world could touch or destroy. This absolute happiness emerges from an entirely different source. Rather than depending on what we have or what happens to us, it springs from who we are at our deepest level. Every human being possesses what Buddhism calls Buddha nature, an inherent potential for wisdom, compassion, and unshakable joy. Most of us live our entire lives without ever accessing this inner treasure. We search for happiness in places outside ourselves, never realizing that what we seek has been within us all along. The process of awakening to our Buddha nature requires more than intellectual understanding. We cannot simply think our way to absolute happiness or achieve it through positive thinking alone. The Lotus Sutra reveals that this awakening happens through the power of the mystic law, the fundamental rhythm and essence of life itself. When we chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, we align our lives with this universal law and begin to manifest our inherent enlightenment. Chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo with sincere faith gradually transforms our inner landscape. At first, we might notice small changes, feeling more resilient during difficult times, experiencing moments of unexplained joy, or discovering an inner strength we didn't know we possessed. As our practice deepens, these moments expand into a steady foundation of confidence that remains unshaken regardless of external circumstances. This doesn't mean that people who chant never face challenges or feel sadness. The difference lies in how they respond to life's inevitable ups and downs. Someone grounded in absolute happiness doesn't become devastated when relative happiness disappears. They don't fall into despair when they lose a job, end a relationship, or face health problems. Instead, they tap into an inner wellspring of strength and wisdom that helps them navigate any storm. The Lotus Sutra illustrates this principle through the parable of the gem in the robe. A poor man falls asleep while visiting a wealthy friend, and the friend secretly sews a precious jewel into his clothing before he leaves. The poor man continues to struggle and suffer, not knowing he carries immense wealth with him everywhere he goes. Only when someone points out the hidden gem does he realize he was never actually poor. Similarly, we all possess the jewel of Buddha nature, but most of us remain unaware of this inner treasure. Nichiren Daishonin emphasized that this treasure becomes accessible through faith in the Gohonzon and the practice of chanting Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. The Gohonzon serves as a mirror that reflects our own Buddha nature, while the chant itself is the key that unlocks our infinite potential. As he wrote in one of his letters, "Never seek this Gohonzon outside yourself." The Gohonzon exists only within the mortal flesh of us ordinary people who embrace the Lotus Sutra and chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. The development of absolute happiness also involves dedicating ourselves to helping others discover their own Buddha nature. This commitment to what Buddhists call our mission creates a sense of purpose that transcends personal gain or loss. When our happiness becomes connected to the welfare of all life, it takes on a quality that no external circumstance can diminish. We find joy not only in our own growth, but in witnessing the transformation of those around us. This principle explains why people who dedicate their lives to serving others often radiate a contentment that seems independent of their material circumstances. Teachers who inspire their students, healthcare workers who comfort the suffering, activists who fight for justice, these individuals often display a deep satisfaction that comes from aligning their lives with something greater than themselves. In Buddhist terms, they have connected with their bodhisattva nature, the aspect of Buddha nature that seeks the happiness of all beings. The contrast between relative and absolute happiness becomes especially clear during times of crisis. When we face serious illness, financial hardship, or the loss of loved ones, our relative happiness may completely disappear. Yet those who have cultivated absolute happiness often surprise themselves and others by maintaining inner peace and even finding meaning in their suffering. They don't become callous or indifferent to pain, but they possess a fundamental trust in life that helps them endure and grow through their challenges. Consider how some people emerge from great difficulties with increased wisdom and compassion, while others become bitter and closed-hearted. The difference often lies in whether they have cultivated an inner source of strength that exists independently of their circumstances. The Lotus Sutra promises that those who embrace its teachings will develop this kind of inner resilience, stating that they will be, quote, peaceful and fearless, regardless of what befalls them. The practice of comparing ourselves to others represents one of the greatest obstacles to both relative and absolute happiness. When we measure our worth by looking at what others have achieved or acquired, we trap ourselves in an endless cycle of competition and dissatisfaction. There will always be someone wealthier, more successful, or apparently happier than we are. Conversely, finding satisfaction in having more than others creates a fragile happiness that depends on their continued misfortune. Nichiren Daishonin cautioned against this trap when he taught that true happiness comes from revealing our own unique potential rather than competing with others. Each person's Buddha nature manifests differently, like flowers of different varieties in a garden. A rose doesn't need to compare itself to a lotus to be perfect in its own way. Similarly, when we focus on developing our own inherent qualities through Buddhist practice, we discover a happiness that doesn't depend on anyone else's failure or success. The eternal nature of absolute happiness distinguishes it most clearly from its relative counterpart. Relative happiness, no matter how intense, always contains the seeds of its own ending. The joy we feel at graduation gives way to anxiety about finding a job. The excitement of a new romance eventually settles into routine or ends in disappointment. Even our happiest memories fade with time, becoming sources of nostalgia rather than present satisfaction. Absolute happiness, however, grows stronger with time and practice. Because it connects us to the eternal mystic law that underlies all existence, it partakes of that eternality. The Lotus Sutra teaches that Buddha nature is beginningless and endless, meaning our capacity for absolute happiness has always existed and will never disappear. Even at the moment of death, this happiness continues because it exists on a level deeper than our physical form. This doesn't mean that accessing absolute happiness requires abandoning the world or living like a monk. Buddhism teaches the middle way, neither extreme indulgence nor extreme denial. We can enjoy relative happiness while simultaneously cultivating its absolute counterpart. The key lies in maintaining proper perspective about what truly matters and where real security can be found. A person grounded in absolute happiness might still feel disappointed when their favorite team loses, or delighted when they receive unexpected good news. The difference is that their overall well-being doesn't depend on these fluctuating experiences. They have found an inner anchor that keeps them stable, regardless of life's storms. This stability then allows them to respond to situations with wisdom, rather than being overwhelmed by emotional reactions. The practice of chanting Nam-myoho Renge-kyo gradually reveals this stability by connecting us to the rhythm of life itself. Each repetition of this sacred phrase aligns our personal vibration with the universal vibration of the mystic law. Over time, this alignment becomes so natural that we carry it with us even when we're not actively chanting. Our daily activities become expressions of the same enlightened energy we tap into during our formal practice. Many practitioners report experiencing moments during chanting when all sense of separation between themselves and the universe dissolves. In these moments, the distinction between seeker and sought, between the one who chants and the law being chanted, disappears entirely. These glimpses of unity reveal the true nature of absolute happiness. It's not something we acquire, but something we already are at our deepest level. The Lotus Sutra describes this realization as opening the Buddha's insight, meaning we begin to see reality from the perspective of enlightened wisdom rather than through the lens of our limited ego. From this expanded viewpoint, every experience becomes an opportunity for growth, and every encounter becomes a chance to express our Buddha nature. Even difficulties transform from obstacles into fuel for our spiritual development. This transformation in perspective represents the ultimate freedom liberation from the tyranny of circumstances. When we no longer need specific conditions to be happy, we become truly free to engage with life on our own terms. We can face challenges with courage, celebrate successes with gratitude, and maintain equanimity through all of life's changes. This is the indestructible confidence that Nichiren Daishonin promised would develop through sincere practice. As we deepen our understanding of these two types of happiness, we begin to make different choices about how to spend our time and energy. Rather than chasing external validation or accumulating possessions we hope will bring satisfaction, we invest in practices and relationships that nurture our Buddha nature. We seek meaning rather than mere pleasure, depth rather than surface excitement, and connection rather than temporary highs. The wisdom that emerges from this practice naturally extends to others, creating ripples of transformation that spread far beyond our individual lives. When we embody absolute happiness, we become living proof that such happiness is possible. Others sense something different about us. A contentment that doesn't depend on getting our way, a strength that doesn't require putting others down, a joy that doesn't fade when the party ends. Through chanting Nam-myoho Renge-kyo with faith in the Gohonzon, we gradually transform from people who are at the mercy of circumstances to people who can maintain their center regardless of what storms may come. This transformation doesn't happen overnight, and it requires consistent effort and sincere seeking. But the promise of Buddhism is that this absolute happiness lies within reach of every human being, waiting to be awakened through the power of the mystic law. Both forms of happiness have their place in a complete human life. We need not reject the simple pleasures and satisfactions that relative happiness provides. Instead, we can appreciate them fully, while building the foundation of absolute happiness that ensures our well-being never depends entirely on their presence or absence. This balanced approach allows us to engage fully with the world while maintaining the inner freedom that comes from connecting with our eternal Buddha nature.